The school-to-prison pipeline gives students to the age of 9 to decide whether or not school is right for them. And that's 4th grade. The alternative becomes a story too often told, unfolding the creases and unstitching the seams of an American dream, robbing the confidence and well-being of a young mind too confused and upset at the world because he had to sleep on the floor again. And she didn't get to eat breakfast, and he hasn't seen her real mom in over 2 years, and she knows his dad is in prison somewhere. And one day on that depressing walk to school where she has a hard time making friends because his jokes are just a little too mature and she doesn't know how to act like a 9-year-old and enjoy his youth, she gets picked up by a D-boy and falls victim to the street's truth because that narrative was one he could see in her future. Instead of the next Supreme Court justice or community advocate or elementary school graduate gradually releasing accountability of making this world better and convinced it's already failed you, falling through the cracks of a crappy infrastructure with reins that can't be turned loose, we can't fix this system. It's broken at its core, so I say destroy it. There's no other option to choose into millions of little pieces so no one could ever use them as clues, so no one could ever put them back together. Turn the diaspora on the chosen few, fueling the propaganda of subjugation, power, and rule. Now let me ask you this. If the revolution starts today, what are you going to do? Hey, hi. Thank you. I'm Asha. I'm an artist, educator, and revolutionary, but I gotta tell you and be honest with you, I didn't always have this confidence that I'm carrying with myself today on this stage. I mean, growing up, I did not feel like I fit in. I didn't have any desi friends. I was full of insecurity, and actually what I did was I sort of chameleon, code shifted, right? So I changed who I was depending on the social groups that I was with. I never felt like I belonged. Which sort of makes sense, being in this body, in this society. I think one of the best representations of that is my journey with my hair. Baby hairs. Instructed to be trained, taught to lie flat, taught to forget the past. Ancestral stories long forgotten. Like Peter Pan refusing to grow up, baby hairs remain in infancy. Terrified of society's products designed to make its visibilities reduced to tired long days and excuses for being angry. You know, I used to stare into the mirror, plucking each one that refused to comply, rejecting the expectations I tried to impose upon its genetics. They just didn't get it. The remarks, the microaggressions, the miseducations I received growing up in neighborhoods and ideologies that told me I needed to normalize kink and avoid natural curl that you labeled distorted. Sitting for hours, asking for help because self-hate manifested its means into heating irons, frying strands of hair, begging them to assimilate. Straightening the wave of discrimination, masking my identity to prove a space worthy of being given attention, and given attention I was. Convinced that kinks in my hair compressed the ability for others to see my value. Deciding to commit to chemically coercing every strand of ethnicity and ancestry to become dormant, only to erupt again after several months. And as a recidivist, I killed my zombie-like identity time after time as soon as I felt my social confidence slipping. I was tripping. Falling for a romanticized fantasy that if I just looked more like them, I would finally feel like I belong. I was wrong. Masks only derailed conversations, exposing ignorance and ultimate exclusion, proving to me that India Arie was the gospel. While I am not my hair is me. Every knot entangled, every split end confused at which direction to follow, at every road diverged, I have learned to love it all. Summertime sunshine highlights, conversations with ancestors through coconut oil meditations, flowing long braids, reminiscing on the strength passed down diasporic journey, held together through exile and Holocaust and excommunication and honesty and discovery of not going down predetermined paths. You know, I am not my hair, but I am proud to say my hair is me. And so you see, some of my confidence came with my understanding of my lineage, right? Because once you get to understand yourself and where you come from, it sort of makes sense because that's where my hair comes from. And so my family on my mother's side is from the Mer tribe on the Dravidian western coast of India. And through imperialism and opportunity for low-caste workers, my family eventually migrated to East Africa to build the railroad for the British, until racial tensions increased so much that South Asians were exiled in 1972 from Uganda. Initially through a refugee camp, my family eventually settled into East London. Until at the age of 17, my mom was then told that she was going to be sent to America and to Los Angeles for her arranged marriage. Somehow, she found the strength and voice of millions of women who are unable to speak out against abuse, and she got a divorce. She ended up meeting and marrying my father, of Eastern European Ashkenazi descent with strong generational roots in Los Angeles. You know, I've grown to own the diaspora, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that comes with it, including using my privilege to challenge and intersect generational trauma, including using my privilege to question traditions that are laden in bias. The journey to understanding myself is an ongoing process. You know, the biggest tattoo I have is a cliche cry to be recognized for my ethnic identity of being South Asian. Only realistically distancing myself from the community and pushing myself closer towards cultural appropriation, Ganesh is easily the most co-opted god of the 330 million in my religion. Aesthetically exploited like white folks wearing saris, not sorry, like Aryan invaders stealing irrigation systems, like British imperialists stealing saris, bringing it back to their community, Columbusing its discovery, erasing its previous history of struggle and rule, like the way we teach African history in K-12 schools. Every time another Om tattoo or yoga mat purchase produces another Deepak Chopra fan, Uncle Tom Sambo of Indians, I squirm. Because I know my mixed ethnicity creates an ambiguity that places me into the same box as folks having henna birthday parties because it just looks so cool. For real, though. All right, I get it. If the Ganesh tattoo doesn't work, there has to be some other way of ethnic declaration. I know it sounds insane, but if I hear you're so exotic, or, hold up, you're Indian, but you don't look it at all. Or, you're mixed though, right? Someone's gonna get a high five to the face. The social construct of race is exactly that. Me having to rely on the stupidity of others to assume my subjugation of grouping. The grueling conversations I'm beginning to be unwilling to have continue to force me to tag my body with cultural graffiti. Proud declarations of low-caste, imperialist-inflicted, bracero-like workers imported from so-called slums and forced to work like a dog while the British became millionaires in East Africa and all over the world. You know, ethnic belonging has only ever belonged to me when I'm surrounded by my family. That is, unless they start speaking Gujarati. Because then again, I'm somehow ousted as being incomplete, and no amount of community college class can teach me the complexity of a language forced to be built with Urdu, Gujarati, and Swahili. No Rosetta Stone can sense the hostility between the local and imported community. Claiming my identity is a compilation of complexities I'm yet to uncover. Constantly seeking validation from my own mother, my own blood. Approval from an intangible anchor of ancestral expectation modeled in disbelief and doubt to preserve the exiled culture. Labeling my minority has never fit a mold. Maps inked out all over my body and pleased to be accepted, honored, valued, found. And it's like I wish I found myself earlier, you know? I wish I knew myself earlier. I wish schools didn't stifle and suppress youth the way that they do. I used my newfound sense of self and security and became a teacher to allow for spaces for students to develop agency and a voice that I never had growing up. I create classrooms where students are able to be vulnerable, take risks, make mistakes, and feel value. We practice bell hooks love in real time. Today, the revolution for me looks like reconstructing education. Now that makes people in power scared. Now listen, I'm talking like really, really scared. Being a social justice warrior, a rainbow warrior, means sometimes you got to get into what the famous civil rights activist John Lewis calls good trouble. It also means accepting the fact that you may be scarred from this world. It's the brutal truth. It's sometimes isolating when divisive tactics pull you away from community. But y'all, I gotta tell you something. I am more sure of myself now than ever before. I know that I am the same person when I am creating, when I'm teaching, and when I'm sparking the revolution. There's space for every version of ourselves on the right side of history. Walk with me on the right side of history. I walk knowing they will question intentions, driven into mass distraction and deception. She walks knowing they are terrified of her coming up on their heels, the feeling of knowing she has always had to run twice as fast, nevertheless she persisted. She walks knowing her body, her very existence is perceived as a threat, knowing that her indigenous skin has had to justify its claim to be deserving of a home. Colonized, displaced, but still rooted in ancestral soil. She spoke, knowing a place would never be handed to her, never given a seat at the table, so she would have to make it. Take it if she had to, but she wouldn't be silenced anymore. She spoke, knowing others would have to stop speaking truths, claiming stories instead of speaking truths, because since a youth, those in power have chosen to fabricate narratives, and she's tired of seeing her community be erased before her eyes. She spoke, knowing so many have been silenced. She's unapologetic, knowing the hair on her knuckles is ancestral gifted wisdom, not another reason to conform, not sorry for clapbacks because entitlements have allowed fingers to run through foreign hair without permission. Unapologetic, disappointed but not surprised, knowing in 2019, over 50 unarmed people were murdered by the police. That over 300 trans people were murdered in the streets. That white supremacy is on the rise from shadows behind familiar faces. She is unapologetic because she is tired of having to apologize. They are tired of having to apologize. They are unapologetic knowing pronouns are trivial until abusive. That a woman is not defined by genitalia. Unapologetic, knowing that binaries are for the past, and in order to preserve the future, dignity and humanity should not be treated as a privileged present. Compassion is not a gift, nor can it be plagiarized. You see, she knew even if she had to do it alone, she would. She would sing when others would say silence. Music of resiliency would find sanity and speak when she had no voice, calling her to decide between justice and love, between any means necessary and complacency. But what the ignorant always fail to recognize is that the most romantic are always the most revolutionary. Thank you so much.